The message arrived on a Tuesday, a series of mathematical sequences, followed by symbolic representations that took the world's best code breakers only 3 days to understand. First contact. The Valari were coming to Earth. Commander James Wilson stood at the viewing platform of the United Earth Defense Headquarters, his weathered face reflecting the anxiety that gripped humanity. 6 months had passed since the message, and today the visitors would arrive. "They're entering orbit, sir," said Lieutenant Adams, her voice steady despite the historic moment. Wilson nodded, and the welcome committee, in position at the landing site, all safety protocols active but hidden, as ordered. The landing site, a flat plane in neutral territory, had been prepared according to the dimensions provided in the alien transmission. World leaders gathered under a simple white pavilion, a gesture of peace and openness. Military forces remained invisible, stationed beyond the horizon, present but not threatening. When the Valari ship descended, it moved with impossible grace for its size. Sleek and silvery, with no visible engines or windows, it settled on the ground without disturbing a single blade of grass. The silence that followed was deafening. Thermal scans show movement inside. Adams reported through Wilson's earpiece. "The outer hull is cooling rapidly." A seam appeared in the smooth surface of the craft. It widened without sound, revealing a ramp that extended toward the human delegation. Light spilled from within, silhouetting 3 tall figures. The Valari walked with fluid movements. They had 4 limbs like humans but were taller, with elongated heads and skin that shimmered with an iridescent quality. Their eyes, 3 per face, blinked in sequence as they approached the human representatives. President Thompson stepped forward. "On behalf of Earth and all humanity, we welcome you to our world." The lead Valari tilted its head. When it spoke, the sound came from a small device at what appeared to be its throat. "We receive your welcome," it said in flawless English. "We have traveled far to meet the species that sends such interesting signals into the void." The initial exchange went well. The Valari expressed interest in human culture and technology. They offered small insights into their own civilization, a federation of worlds spanning several star systems. They asked questions about Earth's resources, population, and defense capabilities. It was this last topic that made Wilson uneasy as he watched from headquarters. "They're too interested in our weapons," he muttered. Third question about nuclear capacity in the last hour. The Valari requested a tour of a military installation. When politely refused, they suggested a demonstration of Earth's orbital defense systems. Again, the diplomatic team declined. The tallest Valari stepped back from the human delegation. It touched a pattern on its wrist. Immediately, 6 smaller craft detached from the main ship and began moving toward major cities. "We detect energy buildups in the smaller vessels," Adams said, her voice now tense. "Signature matches weapon systems." Wilson didn't hesitate. "Activate countermeasures. Protocol Omega." What happened next would be debated for years. The Valari leader made a sudden movement toward President Thompson. Security forces responded instantly. A diplomatic guard fired the first shot when the alien produced a device from within its robes. The alien's blood was blue and thin like water. More Valari emerged from the ship. The smaller craft began firing energy weapons at approaching human aircraft. 3 diplomats fell to alien weapons before military forces could respond effectively. Within minutes, the skies above the landing site became a chaotic display of human and alien technology clashing for the first time. The Valari retreated as quickly as they had arrived, their damaged ships climbing into the atmosphere. Their final transmission came through all communication channels worldwide. "You are not ready, but you are interesting. We will return with greater purpose." Wilson stared at the empty landing site, now scorched and smoking. "No," he whispered. "You'll return to something you're not expecting." The attack changed everything. What once divided humanity now united it. Old enemies became allies, and borders that had stood for centuries began to fade. The Valari had unknowingly created what centuries of human diplomacy could not. A truly united Earth. We have one advantage, Dr. Robert Hayes told the emergency session of the United Nations. They underestimate us. Hayes was a physicist who had once been considered brilliant but eccentric. Now, his theories about advanced defensive systems were being funded with unprecedented resources. He held up a small piece of twisted metal recovered from the Valari skirmish. Their shield technology operates on principles we've theorized but never successfully implemented, he explained. Until now. In underground facilities across the globe, scientists worked without rest. Military leaders from former enemy nations shared intelligence freely. The United Earth Defense, once a symbolic organization with limited power, became the central authority for humanity's preparation. Captain Tom Reed watched the raw recruits stumble through the low-gravity training chamber. 6 months ago, he had been teaching basic flight maneuvers. Now he was preparing pilots for space combat. Again, he shouted as a young woman missed her target. The Valari fighters will change direction faster than anything you've ever seen. You need to anticipate, not react. The recruit nodded grimly and reset her position. Like everyone else, she had lost someone in the brief but devastating attack. Her determination was personal. In Washington, Moscow, Beijing, and other capitals, leaders met weekly to coordinate the buildup. For the first time in human history, military spending flowed without political opposition. Schools adjusted curricula to emphasize sciences that might help in the coming conflict. Children practiced emergency drills, and families built shelters. 8 months after first contact, workers in Brazil made an unexpected discovery while expanding an underground defense facility. Ancient tunnels, clearly artificial but dating back thousands of years, stretched for miles beneath the surface. These weren't made by any known human civilization. Archaeologist Martin Garcia told Commander Wilson as they examined the smooth walls. The dating puts them at around 15,000 years old, but the construction techniques. Wilson ran his hand along symbols etched into the stone. You're saying we've been visited before. I'm saying we've been invaded before, Garcia corrected him. Look at these markings, they're battle records. And more importantly, he pointed to a series of drawings. They show humans winning. Similar discoveries followed in Egypt, China, and Peru. Each site contained evidence that ancient humans had faced, and somehow repelled, technologically advanced invaders. President Thompson addressed a tense meeting of world leaders 18 months after the Valari encounter. The question before us is simple but critical. Do we build purely defensive systems, or do we prepare to take the fight to them? She looked around the room. I've heard arguments for both approaches. General Ivanov of Russia stood. History shows that a defensive posture alone invites aggression. We must have offensive capabilities. But attacking them could provoke an even greater response, countered the Japanese Prime Minister. We don't know their full strength. The debate continued for hours until Commander Wilson spoke. With respect, he said quietly, causing the room to fall silent. This isn't an either-or situation. We prepare for both. 3 years after first contact, humanity had transformed. The Moon hosted a network of defense bases connected by underground railways. Mars became a manufacturing center for ships and weapons that couldn't be built in Earth's gravity. Asteroid mining operations provided raw materials without depleting Earth's resources. Engineer Lisa Morgan stood before the Defense Council, displaying plans for her latest creation. The autonomous combat drones can function as a coordinated swarm or as individual units, she explained. They learn and adapt during combat. Wilson nodded approvingly. How many can we produce? Morgan smiled slightly. How many do you want? As the 5th year without alien contact began, humanity continued its preparations. Early warning stations extended throughout the solar system, disguised as research outposts or mining operations. Every child born now grew up knowing that Earth was not alone, and that the visitors were not friends. They were ready. They were waiting. 10 years passed without a sign of the Valari. 10 years of waiting, watching the stars and building. 10 years that transformed humanity from a planetary species into something more. Commander Wilson, now Admiral Wilson, stood on the observation deck of the Lunar Command Center. His hair had gone completely gray. Behind him, the blue sphere of Earth hung in the blackness, beautiful and seemingly peaceful. Before him stretched the vast complex that housed over 20,000 personnel. 10 years, he said quietly. Captain Reed, now Colonel Reed, nodded beside him. They're coming back. We all feel it. But when? Wilson asked the question that haunted humanity's dreams. The silence that followed was answer enough. No one knew. Mars had changed the most in these quiet years. Once a red desert, parts of it now bustled with activity. Manufacturing centers covered hundreds of square miles, producing components for the fleet. Training facilities housed soldiers from every nation on Earth. Underground, the first generations of Mars-born children were growing up never having seen the sky of their ancestral home. Dr. Hayes supervised the installation of the newest shield generator on the Jupiter defense ring. At 67, he moved more slowly than before, but his mind remained sharp. Primary systems check complete, his assistant reported. The ring is now 94% operational. Hayes nodded with satisfaction. The JDR, as everyone called it, was humanity's masterpiece, a network of platforms hidden within Jupiter's complex ring system. From a distance, they were invisible. When activated, they could generate an energy field that would trap any incoming ships in the massive planet's gravity well. Let's hope we never need to use it, Hayes said, though he didn't believe his own words. On Earth, life continued with a new normal. Children played in parks built over bunkers that could house thousands. Schools taught history that included the first contact incident and astronomy that focused on potential alien worlds. Every city had evacuation plans, and every citizen knew their role if the warning came. Engineer Lisa Morgan stood in her laboratory on the outskirts of what had once been Sydney. Around her, thousands of drones hung suspended in magnetic fields, each no larger than a human hand, but capable of delivering a precisely targeted nuclear payload. The hive mind tests exceeded expectations, she told the visiting officials. They can now recognize and adapt to over 10,000 distinct attack patterns. And if the Valari have developed new tactics? Asked one official. Morgan smiled thinly. That's the beauty of it. The drones learn. Each loss improves the others. In orbit around Neptune, the pride of Earth's new fleet conducted weapons tests. The UES Deterrent, a kilometer-long warship crewed by the best from every nation, could travel between Earth and Mars in days instead of months. Its main cannon could deliver energy equivalent to a small nuclear blast, with pinpoint accuracy across vast distances. Captain Thomas Blake watched the target asteroid disintegrate from the deterrence bridge. Response time was slower than expected, he noted. Run it again. His officers nodded without question. Perfection was the standard. Anything less might mean extinction. The Deep Space Monitoring Station beyond Pluto was the quietest posting in the system. Lieutenant John Parker often went weeks without sending anything but routine reports back to command. His three-person crew monitored the void beyond the solar system, watching for the return everyone expected. The message that broke the silence came during Parker's sleep shift. The computer flagged it as anomalous, not coming from Earth or any human outpost, but definitely artificial. Not Valari either. Parker stared at the translated text on his screen, reading it for the 5th time. They are coming. Be ready. He couldn't determine its origin. The signal seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, as if space itself had spoken. After verifying it wasn't a system error, he sent it to Earth with the highest priority flag. Admiral Wilson was awakened at 300 hours to read the message. He ordered all forces to condition yellow, not a full alert, but a heightened state of readiness. After 10 years, he told his staff, we may finally get to test our preparations. 3 days later, long-range sensors detected disturbances at the heliopause. the boundary where the solar system meets interstellar space. Something large was coming. The silent years were over. The alarm sounded throughout the solar system. On Earth, Mars, and every outpost humanity had built, red lights flashed, and voices stayed calm despite racing hearts. The moment they had prepared for was finally here. Multiple objects emerging from what appears to be artificial wormholes, reported the sensor officer on Pluto Station. Count is 17 large vessels, many smaller craft accompanying them. Admiral Wilson stood in the war room deep beneath the lunar surface. Around him, representatives from every major nation watched as holographic displays showed the incoming fleet. "They're bigger than before," someone whispered. Wilson studied the formation. "And they're not alone." The ships moving toward the solar system didn't match the sleek design of the Valari vessels from 10 years ago. Among the familiar silver crafts were angular black ships, bulbous green vessels trailing luminous gas, and strange crystalline structures that seemed to phase in and out of normal space. 4 distinct design types. Analyzed the tactical eye. Consistent with 4 different species working in concert. Colonel Reed entered the room, his uniform crisp despite being awakened minutes earlier. "The deterrent is ready for launch, sir. All weapons systems green." Wilson nodded. "Keep them at Neptune's orbit. Let's see what they do first." The answer came 3 hours later. A transmission broadcast on all frequencies, in perfect English, and every other major human language simultaneously. A Valari face appeared on screens throughout the system. Behind it stood 3 other alien species, one insectoid, one that seemed made of shifting plasma, and one that resembled a reptile standing upright. "Humans of Earth," the Valari spoke. "We return as promised. We represent the Harvesters Collective, an alliance of species who maintain order in this sector of the galaxy. Your world has resources we require. Your resistance a decade ago was unexpected but futile. Surrender now, and a portion of your population will be permitted to live as our subjects. Resist, and we will take what we need regardless." The transmission ended abruptly. In the war room, silence reigned for several seconds. "They don't know," said Dr. Hayes with a small smile. "They have no idea what we've built." President Collins, who had been elected on a platform of defense preparedness, stood up from her chair. "Admiral Wilson, please transmit our response." Wilson nodded to the communications officer. Across the vast distance of space, the aliens received a simple message: "We're ready and waiting." Then Wilson gave the order that set humanity's decade of planning into motion. "Activate the Jupiter defense ring." The seemingly empty space around Jupiter suddenly came alive. Hundreds of platforms hidden in the planet's rings powered up simultaneously, creating a web of energy that caught the first wave of alien scouts completely by surprise. 7 smaller vessels were immediately trapped in the energy field, their systems disrupted by precisely calibrated electromagnetic pulses. "First blood to us," muttered Reed. The alien armada paused its advance, clearly reassessing. Then it split into 3 groups, one continuing toward Jupiter, one moving toward Mars, and one taking a wide arc toward Earth. "Just as we predicted," said Wilson. "Colonel Reed, the deterrent is yours. Show them what humanity has learned." Reed saluted sharply and left for his ship. Within 30 minutes, the deterrent broke orbit from Neptune, leading a fleet of 40 smaller but heavily armed vessels. They accelerated at forces that would have killed humans before the development of inertial dampening systems, another technology reverse-engineered from the wreckage of Valari ships. The battle for the outer solar system began with a flash that briefly outshone the sun. The Jupiter defense ring caught the first wave of attackers, while the deterrent engaged the force heading toward Mars. On Earth, civilians moved calmly to the shelters. Children held their parents' hands, remembering their drills. This was not a panic. This was the moment they had prepared for all their lives. In his command chair on the deterrent, Colonel Reed watched the alien fleet grow larger on the view screen. "All weapons lock on the lead vessels," he ordered. Let's show them humanity isn't what they remember. The ship's main cannon charged with a high-pitched whine. Humanity's first interstellar battle had begun. The battle raged for 3 days. Human losses were heavy but acceptable. The alien casualties were beyond anything their commanders had expected. Engineer Morgan's drone swarms proved devastatingly effective, sacrificing themselves in coordinated attacks that overwhelmed alien shields. The Jupiter defense ring trapped and disabled dozens of enemy vessels. The deterrent, despite taking heavy damage, destroyed 3 major harvester ships. On the 4th day, Colonel Reed saw his opportunity. A damaged alien vessel, one of the crystalline ships, drifted away from the main fleet, its propulsion systems failing. "Boarding teams prepare," Reed ordered. "This is what we've trained for." The capture operation took less than an hour. The alien crew, beings that seemed partly crystalline themselves, fought to the last, but were overwhelmed by human determination and the armor developed by Dr. Hayes. The ship was secured with minimal human casualties. Dr. Julia Winters led the science team that boarded the captured vessel. As the foremost xenobiologist in the United Earth Defense, she had studied the limited Valari remains for years. Now she had an entire ship to examine. "Their technology is biological," she reported to Admiral Wilson via secure channel. "The ship itself is partly alive. But that's not the most important finding." Her team had accessed the alien equivalent of a computer system, crystals that stored information in their molecular structure. What they found changed everything. "Earth isn't random," she explained, her voice trembling slightly. "We were seeded. Thousands of worlds were. The Harvester's collective plants the seeds of civilization, lets them develop, then harvests the results when they reach a certain technological level." Wilson's face remained impassive on the screen. "Harvests what exactly?" "Resources, technology, biological specimens, cultural artifacts. They're collectors. They've been doing this for millions of years. It's how they advance, by letting other species do the innovation, then taking it." While Dr. Winters made this discovery, Admiral Wilson had authorized a dangerous mission. Commander Mark Foster, leading an elite infiltration team, had been deployed to the Harvester command ship, a massive Valari vessel directing the invasion. Foster's team used technology derived from the Valari's own cloaking systems to board undetected. Moving silently through the alien ship, they placed quantum data extractors at key locations. "Their security is focused outward," Foster whispered to his team. They never expected anyone to get inside. In the ship's equivalent of a data center, Foster discovered records that confirmed Dr. Winters' findings and revealed much more. The Harvesters had subjugated hundreds of species across multiple galaxies. Some were kept as slave races, others were harvested to extinction. Most disturbing was the evidence that Earth had been visited before, not just once, but multiple times throughout human history. The ancient bunkers found in Brazil and elsewhere were real defense installations built by early humans with help from another alien species that had tried to protect Earth from the Harvesters. The previous defenders were wiped out, Foster reported as his team worked to download as much data as possible. But they helped humans drive off a Harvester attempt 15,000 years ago. The Harvesters didn't return until now because they thought we had powerful allies. And now, Wilson asked, they think those allies are gone. They came back expecting primitives with simple weapons. Foster's team was discovered just as they finished extracting the critical data. Their escape was chaotic and costly. Only Foster and 2 others made it back to their extraction point, and 1 died before reaching human-controlled space. When Foster delivered the data to Admiral Wilson, his face was grim. "Sir, they have 5 more fleets like this one, waiting to see if this attack succeeds. If we don't stop them now, they'll overwhelm us with numbers." Wilson studied the tactical displays showing the battle still raging throughout the solar system. "Then we change the game. We take the fight to them." He opened a channel to President Collins. "Madam President, I recommend we authorize Operation Longbow." Collins' expression was solemn. The counteroffensive. Yes, ma'am. We now know their central worlds. It's time to show them humanity isn't just another harvest. The president nodded once. Approved, Admiral. God be with our forces. Earth's forces pushed outward with unexpected fury. The alien fleet, now on the defensive, retreated beyond Neptune's orbit. What had begun as an invasion was becoming a rout. They're regrouping at their staging point near Proxima Centauri. Admiral Wilson informed the War Council. The holographic display showed the enemy's withdrawal routes. Now we implement Longbow. Operation Longbow had been theoretical until now, a plan so ambitious that many considered it impossible. It called for humanity's first interstellar assault. Colonel Reed, his face bearing new scars from the battle at Jupiter, studied the proposed attack vectors. The deterrent can lead the strike force. We've repaired the main propulsion systems and upgraded the forward shields. And my drones? Asked Engineer Morgan. Wilson nodded to her. Your swarms will deploy as our first wave, a decoy fleet, to draw their defenses while the main force approaches from another vector. The preparations took 3 weeks. Every available shipyard worked non-stop to repair damaged vessels and convert others for the coming battle. The captured alien ship provided insights that accelerated human technology by decades in some areas. Dr. Hayes presented his latest creation to the War Council the day before the offensive was to begin. We call it the quantum displacement weapon, he explained, showing diagrams of a device now mounted on the deterrent. It doesn't destroy matter, it shifts it partially out of our dimensional space. The effect is temporary but devastating to any technology or biological system. Has it been tested? President Collins asked. Hayes nodded. On a small scale, this will be its first full deployment. As the human counteroffensive prepared to launch, something unexpected happened. A transmission reached Earth from deep space, bypassing normal communication channels. It showed a being unlike any of the harvester species, tall with 6 limbs and blue-green skin. People of Earth, it said in accented but clear English, I am Ambassador Trell of the Resistance Alliance. We have observed your defense against the harvesters with great interest. You are not alone in fighting these predators. The revelation that other species actively resisted the harvesters changed the strategic landscape. 3 previously unknown civilizations made contact, each offering assistance. One provided advanced navigation data for interstellar travel. Another shared weapons technology that complemented human developments. The third offered ships to join the assault. Admiral Wilson addressed the combined human and alien forces as the counteroffensive prepared to launch. Today, we do not fight just for Earth, he said, his voice carried to every ship and outpost. We fight for all free species who refuse to be harvested. Today, humanity joins a greater community, not as victims, but as defenders. The deterrent led the attack fleet into the void between stars. For the first time, human vessels purposely left their solar system, carrying with them the hopes of their species and now several others. Engineer Morgan watched from the command ship as her drone fleet deployed. 10,000 small, deadly machines spreading into a vast cloud that moved faster than any crewed vessel could travel. Drones have reached the harvester staging area, reported the sensor officer. They're engaging the defensive platforms. On view screens throughout the human fleet, Morgan's drones swarmed the enemy installations. Each drone was essentially a small missile guided by artificial intelligence, capable of adapting its attack pattern based on enemy responses and communicating these adaptations to the rest of the swarm. The harvesters, still recovering from their failed invasion of Earth, responded with massive energy weapons that destroyed hundreds of drones. But for each one destroyed, the others learned and adjusted. While the drones occupied the defenders, the deterrent and its escort ships approached from another direction, guided by the navigation data provided by their new allies. We're within range, Colonel Reed reported from the deterrent's bridge. Quantum displacement weapon is charged and ready. Admiral Wilson, who had insisted on commanding the attack personally, gave the order that would change the course of the war. Target their command structure. Fire. The weapon activated with a silent pulse that rippled through space like a stone dropped in water. Where it touched harvester ships, strange distortions appeared. Metal and crystal twisted as parts of each vessel shifted partially out of normal space-time. The effect spread through the harvester fleet, rendering their technology useless and their warriors incapacitated. Not destroyed, but helpless. As the human fleet moved into position around the disabled harvester forces, Colonel Reed turned to Admiral Wilson. "Should we finish them?" Wilson shook his head. "No, we're not like them. Prepare a message for transmission to their homeworld." President Collins had approved the text days earlier. It would be humanity's formal introduction to the wider galactic community, and a warning that would echo across the stars. The combined fleet arrived at the Harvester Central World 3 days later. It hung in space like a jewel, a ringed planet twice the size of Earth, surrounded by artificial structures that had taken thousands of years to build. This was the heart of the Harvesters Collective, the seat of power that had directed the subjugation of countless civilizations. Admiral Wilson stood on the bridge of the deterrent, looking at the alien world on the main view screen. The ship's sensors showed defensive platforms activating, smaller vessels moving to intercept. The Harvesters were preparing for battle. "They still don't understand," Wilson said quietly. "After everything, they still think this is just another conflict they can win with superior numbers." Commander Foster, now Wilson's second-in-command, nodded. "Should we enlighten them, sir?" Wilson smiled grimly. "Open a channel. All frequencies, all languages we've decoded from their databases, and prepare the demonstration." The communications officer worked quickly. "Channel open, sir. They'll hear you throughout their system." Wilson straightened his uniform and faced the camera. Behind him stood representatives of humanity and the 3 allied species that had joined their cause. This moment would be recorded in the histories of a dozen worlds. "Attention, Harvesters Collective," Wilson began, his voice steady and clear. "I am Admiral James Wilson of United Earth Defense. For millennia, you have traveled the stars as predators, seeing other species as nothing more than resources to be exploited. You have ended civilizations, enslaved populations, and stolen the achievements of others to fuel your empire." He paused, letting his words carry across the vast distances. "When you came to Earth, you expected another easy harvest. What you found instead was humanity. We sought peace. You brought war. We are not prey. We are not alone. We are humanity." Wilson nodded to Foster, who gave the order to activate the quantum displacement weapon. Its target was not the Harvester homeworld, but one of its moons, a barren, uninhabited satellite roughly the size of Earth's moon. The weapon fired. Across the fleet, crew members watched in awe as the moon seemed to ripple and distort. Parts of it shifted partly out of normal space, creating a twisted, impossible shape that hurt the eyes to look at. The effect lasted only 30 seconds before the moon snapped back into its proper dimension, but now with a quarter of its mass simply gone, leaving a perfect spherical void. "That was at 10% power," Wilson continued, knowing the demonstration had the Harvester's complete attention. "We could have targeted your world. We could have ended your civilization as you have ended so many others. But that is not our way." The sensors showed the Harvester defense fleet halting its approach. Emergency signals flashed between their ships. "Here is humanity's message to you and all spacefaring species. We will defend ourselves and our allies with whatever force is necessary. We will not tolerate aggression. We will not be harvested." Wilson's expression softened slightly. "But we also offer another path. Join the galactic community as equals, not conquerors. End your harvests. Free your slave species. Share knowledge rather than stealing it." There was silence for nearly a minute. Then a response came, a Harvester leader, its voice translating through the ship's systems. "Your demonstration is compelling," it said. "The collective will consider your terms." "This isn't a negotiation," Wilson replied. "This is the new reality. You have 1 standard year to comply." We'll be watching." The transmission ended. In the weeks that followed, the Harvesters sued for peace. Their empire, built on intimidation and technological superiority, crumbled when faced with a force they couldn't overwhelm. The slave species they had subjugated for generations began uprisings that couldn't be contained. 1 year later, the First Galactic Council convened. Humanity sat as a founding member, alongside their allies from the resistance and reformed elements of the former Harvester Collective. The age of predation was ending. On Earth, life gradually returned to a new normal. The defenses remained, constantly improved and updated. The fleet continued to grow, now venturing to distant stars on missions of exploration rather than war. At the edge of the solar system, humanity established a permanent warning beacon. It broadcast continuously in all directions, a simple message for any who might approach with harmful intent. "This is Earth. We sought peace. We found war. We prevailed. We're ready and waiting." In Admiral Wilson's office on the Moon, a small piece of Valari technology sat on display, a reminder of the day humanity learned it was not alone, and more importantly, not helpless. Beside it stood a photograph of Earth taken from deep space, a small blue dot that had changed the course of galactic history. Wilson looked at that image often, remembering the words he had spoken to the stars. "We are humanity." 3 simple words that now carried weight throughout the galaxy.